Just went wide.
All righty, we are on.
Good afternoon. My name is Sergeant Alfonso Santillan, retired from the United States Marine Corps. I would like to introduce our first guest speaker in the series of 3. She is a woman Marine that served during the Korean Air conflict. She is going to share with us historical places that she's visited, VIPs that she's met along her way, and the struggle she had as a woman in the Marine Corps had at that time. Things have changed a lot today, but at that time, back in the 1950s, it was a lot different. She is a website master and member of the Marine Corps League. She's a judge advocate and adjutant of the Granite Mountain Board Society and member of the Korean War Veterans. Would you please welcome Corporal Barbara Steele.
Thank you. Well, as you can see, you see a little old lady here. I'm all of 81 years of age. I joined the Marine Corps in December 1950. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, California. I was educated here in public and Catholic schools. My antecedents came in 1781 with an expedition to settle in what they called Alta California. They founded the presidios in Los Angeles, Ventura, and Santa Barbara. And of course, my family's been there for over 300 years. They were made citizens by the Treaty of Hidalgo. I can't say much more than that, except they trucked along in California at a time when it wasn't too fine for the Indians, and of which I bring up I am Apache, Yaqui, Conchos, and perhaps some Chumash from the Santa Barbara region. I've just recently been allowed to register as an Apache. On my mother's side, I believe there's Conchos, and they had a relative who defended and died at the Alamo. So all of the relatives have been in the military. My family in itself, I had an older brother in the Marine Corps, 2 in the Navy, and I'm the other bookend with the Marines. My brother was wounded after Chosin, and then the 2 boys in the middle were in battleships off the coast of Korea. And then I signed up and went to Parris Island, South Carolina. I'm nervous as heck. What are you going to do?
You're doing fine.
I'm quite nervous.
Doing good. Everybody smile at us. Smile. When people are nervous, you smile. That makes you feel better.
So I found that I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. Santa Barbara was flooded with military. We had Lompoc, which is now Vandenberg. We had Port Hueneme, the Seabees. We had the Coast Guard all the time in the harbor. We had Hoff Heights Hospital, which was part of Lompoc. And we had people coming from all over the world there. The thing that really fascinated me was the Air Force Air Base at Goleta, and there was Pappy Boyington's group. And there were some women Marines. And when they'd come into town, I'd see those ladies, and I wanted to wear that uniform awful bad. Well, in high school, at my senior year, I started bugging the recruiting officer. And he was so angry at me, he says, I'm going to change the age limit just so you can get rid of you. Well, after graduation, they changed the age limit, and I was sent to Los Angeles, where we had an examination. I got on a train with 4 other girls. And come to my surprise, it was a troop train. So we went from California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, to catch a train to go north to Parris Island. It took a few days to go on that train, and we kind of entertained ourselves. One of the fellows was a hypnotist. So I guess you know, for 3 or 4 days on that train, we had a ball. They had to get off.
That's fun.
They had to get off in Arizona, New Mexico to buy some celebration drinks because we were in Texas on New Year's. It's a blue state. no liquor on the train even. And at that time, they started changing the cars around. They put the military to the back, and then they put the civilian cars up towards the front. And they started moving people around. And those days, there was segregation. And so they moved some people around. We went from there to New Orleans. The fellas
Can you expand on the segregation, because a lot of us don't know about that?
Oh,
What exactly?
I'm getting there.
Yeah,
Well,
what
thank you.
exactly what happened? Yeah.
They put the black people in a certain car, separated from everybody else. And the Mexicans didn't fare too well either. My being Mexican created some problems also. I'll get to that later. We got to New Orleans. The guys got to get off the train and have 24-hour leave there, but we were not allowed. They held the Southerner for us to take us up to Paris Island. Well, they stopped in Atlanta, Georgia. We got into the hotel, we checked in and everything, and then we went looking for a restaurant. We found a nice Italian restaurant. The five of us sat down, the girls ordered, and they said, "We don't serve coloreds here." And that was me. Well, after a while, about 20 of the fellas came in from the train. They sat down, they heard about what had happened, they ordered, and then they all got up and said, "If you can't serve her, you can't serve us." And they grabbed me and we all trooped out of there. Well, then we went up to Paris Island. We were about 2 or 3 weeks early, so we got special attention in our civics. When they finally gave us our uniform, we got 1940s issue from the Second World War. It created kind of a problem later on, but we had a lot of fun. Because of that extra skills, we were top platoon. And in doing the thing on the reviewing field at graduation, you know about columns left and columns right and all that. Well, I was a feather merchant because I'm so short. So we're going past the reviewing stand, and just as I get there, they step out. And as we're going along, I reached down, grabbed my skirt, and pulled it up so I could make the step, because the skirts were too tight from 1945 and whatever. They had rationing at that time, so they cut back on the amount of material in the skirt. And I wasn't the only one. The people behind me were doing the same thing, so we kind of flashed the reviewing stand.
That's good.
Nothing was ever said about it.
Hey, can I show one of these pictures here of you?
Yes.
You ready for that? This is 1951, right?
1951, yes.
Okay, and so that, how old were you then?
I was 18.
All right, that's just like the ages here. Okay, 18. That's 19. That's not a convict picture. It looks like a convict picture, doesn't it? That's actually a Marine, signature of Marine. That is pretty sharp. And
That was for my
did you want me to show you one of these pictures of the
uniforms and the ladies in formation? Well, after graduation, I was sent down to Camp Lejeune in, in North Carolina for basic supply school. We were restricted to base for about 2 weeks until we learned and memorized the military code of justice, or the other way around. And then I was sent, after graduation, I was sent to San Francisco. That was duty. That was really great duty. We didn't have barracks, so we got commuted rations. In other words, the Marine Corps gave us extra money so we could pay for apartments, boarding house, whatever accommodations we could find. And what we did there was we filled out the orders from Fleet Marine Forces Pacific, that's FMF PAC. And we tried to make certain that they didn't get the wrong uniforms at the wrong time of the year. I had been to visit my brother at Mare Island, having survived Chosin. He was wounded later on and sent back to have his heels amputated from frostbite and other wounds. And he complained that they were getting summer uniforms in the winter. So I made very sure that all the orders I filled were the right time, right place, and so forth. After San Francisco, somebody got caught drinking in uniform, underage, and we were all shipped out. Anyone under 21 was shipped out. I got Pendleton. While in San Francisco, we would, a couple of gals and I, would go up to Letterman Hospital to visit with the Army boys, fresh from Japan, and it was pretty bad. Well, we tried to check our emotions at the door because the boys, fresh wounds, not in good shape. But we had fun. They would meet us at the bus station in their wheelchairs, and we'd climb on board the back, and then we'd go up and down the hills at Letterman. And one time, they snuck out and met us to go dancing. So we were at this one place, and we were jitterbugging and all that, and one big, tall, black fellow said, "You want a jitterbug?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." So we got out there, we were jitterbugging and having a great time. He said, wait a minute. Went back to the table, he took off a leg. So we started jitterbugging again. And he said, wait a minute. And he took off the other leg. Got in his wheelchair, but by God, we jitterbugged some more. So that's the kind of people we saw there. And hopefully we did them some good. And we helped them. So anyway, I went down to Camp Pendleton, and there it kind of reversed things. We were getting all the equipment, personal gear from the boys overseas that had been wounded or killed. And we had to sort through them and kind of clean them out and make sure that the parents and loved ones did not get anything that would give them pain, because they were pretty bloody and torn up. And other stuff they might have had that you should have sent to the parents. So I married a Marine, and they wouldn't let me stay in. So my daughter brags to this day she's my honorable discharge. She's a pretty good kid. Well, going back to the Native American side in Atlanta, Georgia, and all that, while at Camp Lejeune, I had to be very careful when I went into town. I was on the bus. I gave a black lady my seat. She was very pregnant. They stopped the bus. They would not move the bus, and the MPs took me off the bus. Then they moved on. This was a constant. It was a time, it was a place, and as we went through the states...
The years were about?
1950.
1950, guys, is when this happened.
Yeah. And as we went through these different states, they all had different restrictions, varying degrees of segregation and so forth. So it's strange to say this, but they would actually take the train and the cars and shift them around to accommodate this segregation. There was nothing you could do. All you could do is just shut your mouth and stay out of trouble. Keep your sheet clean, your SRB clean, and get on with your life. When it came to being Native American, there were some restrictions also, because in the South at that time, if your skin had too much pigment in it, or is it the reverse? The light color has more pigment than the dark, something like that. Yeah. That's just the way it was. We went horseback riding. We found places to go, joints, you might call them, for jazz and that sort of thing. We went to the churches so that we could find out what the different religions were and so forth. I found the Marine Corps to be very, very uplifting. I went in there, of course, with a very low self-esteem, and that started changing right away in boot camp. My father told me when I got getting on the bus, leaving town, he said, "You asked for this, and I don't want to hear any complaints in any more of your life choices." So I enjoyed boot camp, believe it or not. I loved the Marine Corps, and I would do it again in a hot minute if they'd take me. So I hope, if there are any questions you have for me, how did you choose the Marines? How did the Marines find you? Well, at Goleta, as I said before, was a Marine Corps air station, and the women Marines would come into town. And of course, there were posters all over the place, join the Marine Corps and so forth. And I one day wanted to wear that uniform so bad. That's why I wore this hat, because this is a uniform hat, Class A. And I lost everything in the fire, so I have no artifacts from my time in the service.
And this is I got the picture here of you marching, that's the typical women Marines. That's very unusual.
That is just after the war, and those are the uniforms of the day. Now the uniforms have changed considerably since then. They've tweaked the uniform a little here and a little there, but that's more. Otherwise, it's the same. The only other thing that is really different is the women are going into combat. Now what they're doing is they're picking special women. They're putting them through special paces to see if they can hack it. And there's about 20% that don't make it. So they get down to a few special few. Now, I was raised, believe it or not, to be a warrior. My father raised me in the Indian Native American style. I hunted very early in life. I took care of my own kills. I dressed them down. I was taught target practice. I was taught to strip and field my father's very, very old rifle, 30-30. And it was from 1800s. I was up on the roof, helping him with the roof. I was out there gentling the horses. I was doing everything that my brothers would have done had they been interested. So that's what these little medals are for. The Native Americans have decided they would honor the veterans of America for their service to this country. And so they give these medals to any veteran if they happen to be at the powwow or wherever they are. Now with the Board Society, I get in my regalia. I no longer can dance, but I still get in my regalia and I do all that is necessary to do the spiritual part of it. I dance behind the men because in the Native American society of the warrior, he dances in front of you. You are supporting him. You are his total support system. And that's why you'll see the women dance behind him. It has nothing to do with today's feminine movement or anything. It is tradition that goes back hundreds of years. So we try to maintain that. Otherwise, in my time, with my culture, I did something that was not right. My aunt said, when she heard I had joined the Marine Corps, she said, but she was such a good girl. And that was the attitude. Women of my culture did not go into the military. They were anything but feminists, and it was always the patriarchal system with the women. You followed what the men said. I don't know what else to tell you, but the Marine Corps gave me a chance to travel the country. I would never have done that. They gave me self-esteem. They gave me an education. I also used the GI Bill afterwards to go to school. I married a Marine who was also in Korea. He got the Silver Star. My brother got the Bronze Star for his action.
How did you meet him?
Well, he was in the barracks across the street.
It's pretty convenient.
One day, some colonel's wife saw that the fence was down from around the women's barracks. It seems the boys got the wrong work order, you think? It went up right away. And they did funny games, like one night we found a red lantern on our barracks door. And the next night they found it on their barracks. And then it found it a little higher in the building on our barracks, and it went back and forth. And that's how I met my husband. And if I hadn't gotten pregnant right away, I would have stayed. But today you can be married, you can have your children, your wives, the whole family, the whole bit. But in those days you couldn't. I was immediately discharged from the service after 3 months pregnancy.
And where did he go off to war?
Actually, he ended up in the brig.
Oh, there you go. I'm saying, you said, that's not standing Marine, right? But didn't you talk about the Silver Star or whatever? Where
Well, what he did was, there was an ambulance convoy coming through, and they were under heavy fire.
Where?
In Korea.
Korea, okay.
And they were under heavy fire, and he was in the engineers, and he took his bulldozer, and he filled in the holes while he was being shot, and he protected the convoy. And they couldn't get him off the machine until he'd seen that the convoy got through. He was wounded. So he came back to the States. My brother got his Bronze Star. He was also, somebody had said something about, they had put him up for the Medal of Honor for his action. Seems there was a breakthrough. He found a tank with a machine gun on it. He got into it and kept firing all night, even though he was wounded, and his feet were frostbitten. And you have to remember at those times that if your feet were frostbitten, it was could be discharged. It was an offense, and you could get a dishonorable discharge for having frostbitten feet, because you were supposed to take care of them. But you have to remember, again, I go back to it. I made sure they got the right equipment at the right time of the year, because if you didn't have the right foot gear, and they didn't, that was the problem. And he got frostbite. They amputated his heels and fixed all his other wounds from the concussion grenade and the fragmentary grenade. But he never got the Medal of Honor, and he died in September of last year. A very proud Marine. Thank you.
That's great. Appreciate that. Okay, Barbara, do you mind come up here and have some questions? Any questions from the floor? And I have a couple myself, please. Where were you in high school at this age?
I was at Santa Barbara Catholic High School. And again, that was another reason why I did the wrong thing. And by joining the Marine Corps, the Catholic Church was very strict on that sort of thing. I went to college in Glendale, California. I lived in Burbank at the time.
And that was after
I was
Korea.
discharged. I was using the
Okay.
GI Bill to go to school.
There you go. GI Bill helped him.
All right. And that was another reason for joining the Corps. I knew that because of my family's circumstances, I'd never have the money to go to college. So this worked out very well. Then we had, I raised the 2 children. I joined the Marine Corps League in Burbank. And what can I tell you? I was always, always, always proud of being a Marine. And if I could ever tell anybody in some way, like wearing a visor with Marine Corps emblem on it, or emblem on the car, but I could never get my children interested in the military.
I know how that feels.
But now my daughter is more gung-ho than I was.
Well, good.
She is a member of the Marine Corps League as an associate member, and she's always getting after me if I don't have my covers on. She's using the word covered. She's using the word of, what do they call it, the blouse. She corrects me when I say jacket. She said, "No, Mom, that's a blouse." And my daughter has 2 Emmys from all of my children for makeup work. My cousin, following his footsteps, has an Oscar for How the West Was Won and an Emmy for How the West Was Won. So she fell naturally into the media field, and I didn't let her get hold of me this morning. I got out of there before she touched me. I didn't want her doing the makeup and giving me all kinds of hints on how to do the media thing.
That's neat. That's neat. Any other questions for you guys, please?
Yes.
Where were you during 9/11, if you don't mind my asking?
I was in Colusa, California. My daughter was at CBS, and all the antennas went down, and that was the only station open. And she had to take like Giuliani and the firemen and those, and she had to clean them up to put them on screen. And she was picking off body parts, cleaning them up. And now she has PTSD from 9/11. She lived on Madison Avenue and 34th Street, and there were constant 4, 5, 9, 10 times a day evacuations, and the military was dressed like ninjas, carrying their rifles, everything. It was military practically, and they were constantly taking people and evacuating because she lived 2 blocks from the Empire State Building. There were constant threats against the Empire State Building. And it was a mess. I went to visit her in November that year, 2 months later, and went to Ground Zero. And I came back with a terrible cough that I've never gotten rid of. It was a mess, dirty. The air was not clean, and there were a lot of people that were very sick. So I called her, see how everything was going. She now lives with me, and she still hasn't got it. She cannot see anything that shows the Twin Towers. She just can't hack it. It was that bad for everybody.
Al's got a question.
Yes, Al.
How about the black sheep? Tell us about that.
Oh, well, that was the other thing about Galita. The black sheep were there, but Pappy Boynton was not. He was in the brig.
Black sheep, ma'am?
The black sheep, the famous. Have you ever seen that program on TV about Pappy Boynton and the black sheep? They were a special Air Force group. Pappy Boynton was one of those cowboys, and his group, they were a bunch of fellows that just had a ball killing Japanese. They were very good at what they did, and they were always in trouble with the government, especially with the Marine Corps. But they were out at the station there, and we had a lot of Marines and, of course, Navy supporting them. And the women, there was a complement of about 300 women there during that time. That would be 1941 to 1945. We had military in Santa Barbara. As I said, we had all the services. And when these people would come into town, the Marines always showed them. And of course, they were always making trouble, you know, always getting in fights and things, but I think that most of the military men and women had a right to get carried away at times because their life was so tragic. They saw so many tragic things, they did so many tragic things, that they had a right to let it out some way. So we never gave them any problems, and the police in town didn't either. They just took them back to the base or handed them over to the MPs and say, you know, just take them home. They've earned it. Any more questions? Yes?
Why did your husband get thrown in the brig?
He got drunk in a fight. He was having to be with some of the boys at a bar. And somebody said something not nice about the Navy. I guess he was a corpsman. And you know how the Navy and the Marine, they'll fight each other, but they've got each other's back. And when anybody else says anything, you got a fight on your hands.
What a lot of young people don't realize is this is World War II. They didn't have pot and drugs or ecstasy or meth or whatever you think of. They had beer, okay, and alcohol.
Right.
And if you mix up all the young people bad choices that all you guys could make and all your friends and put it in beer and alcohol, that was it. Smoking cigarettes was absolutely normal. Everybody smoked cigarettes. And but when you have young people and beer and alcohol, unlimited. I don't even think there was a minimum age drinking back then. Think about it. And you're going to war, so you're certainly going to blow off steam. You're certainly going to go crazy because your mom and dad or family's off war. There were limits, obviously, and you would get in trouble. But it wasn't uncommon. Put it that way. It was not uncommon.
It was very difficult because, as I mentioned before, we had a Army hospital called Hoff Heights in the San Roque area of Santa Barbara. And so we also went down there. Oh, I forgot to tell you, we had troop trains coming through town. And everybody would gather together and run over there to the trains and making with sandwiches, chocolates, soda, whatever we could put together to feed the guys. They'd hang out the windows, just like they did in the movies, you know. That's exactly what they did. We tried to give them whatever we could and send them off because we know where they were going. And we visited at Hoff Heights, and then again I visited at Letterman's in San Francisco. We saw the results. There was one boy who was about 80% covered with burns from napalm. Nobody could go in there, but I charged in anyway. And they let me stay there while they changed his dressings. And then when we left, I kind of lectured him. He had no rights, that had not let his mother and his fiance come up. He was so badly burned and so mauled. So before I left, I walked up to him and I gave him such a smooch. And I said, now there, you call your mother, you call your fiance up here. You have no right to keep them away. And I left. 3-4 years later, I'm in Burbank. I'm coming out of my office building. And there's this fellow waving at me. And I'm, who the heck's he? I don't know him. Well, the next day, I go into the restaurant to take food back to the girls at the office. And there he is, with his mother, his wife, and 3 kids. And he can't wait to show me his van the military had given him, because with all the wounds, they amputated. And he was almost a quadriplegic. But that kiss made him think. And he got his mother and his fiance up there, and he started his family. He did not quit. And that's what we tried to do when we went to the hospitals, because these boys, they didn't know what they were getting into, but they sure found out in a hell of a hurry.
It's good. What else? How did you end up here in Prescott?
My cousin needed a roommate, and so I came up here to share expenses. My husband had died. My children, one was in New York City, the other was in Bemidji, Minnesota. He liked to hunt, fish, ski, you know, all that sort of thing up there in the cold country. And that's how I got here. But, you know, there was something different about Arizona up here in Prescott. It was like I had come home. And checking, doing the genealogy, by God, I had come home. An Apache. And some of my family, some of the ancient ones, my line, came from here. So my daughter and I both feel we have come home.
That's good. Did you experience any of the prejudice in California that you experienced in Atlanta and the other parts of America?
All my life, since I was a little girl. And my father taught me, in teaching me to be a warrior, he taught me to be proud of myself. That you live in your head 24 hours a day, you're damn well better like the company. And he just said, you have to be proud of what you are. It's not what they're doing that's a problem, it's your reaction. It's what you do after you have been insulted. And if you realize you're not really being insulted because they can't reach you, what's your problem? And that's how I managed to get through life. After the Marine Corps, it was no more managing. I was pretty well set in how I was going to be, who I was going to be, and I was a Marine. And that above anything else. I don't know what it is about the training. I have no idea what it is about the Marine Corps and how they bring you along, but it is true. You go through life saying, I'm a Marine. Look at me. I'm just an 81-year-old lady who's had back surgeries, I've had cancer, I've had stents, and I stand tall here and I'll salute you the minute I see you. And I thank you.